There's a gentleman on the phone now from Rhinebeck, New York, who tells us the truth whether we want to hear him or not. We invite him because this is an open forum for people with the ability to express ideas that are independent. Gerald Celente. Gerald is one of today's pioneers in trend strategy. He founded the Trends Research Institute in Kingston, New York. He is the publisher of the TrendsJournal that has been in publication for a long time, about 35 years. And he is accurate on so many of his predictions. Nice to have you with us today, Gerald.
Oh, thanks for having me, Gary. You know, I've used to be on Judge Napolitano's show, and we used to go out to dinner, etc. And he's exactly who he is, on the air and off the air. And you know, the voice of freedom doesn't ring very loud anymore in this country. If you don't toe the line, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. And as now what we see going on, if you say anything bad about Israel, you're an anti-Semite. So not much has changed in either quarter.
Well, here's what we're going to do today, and I've set aside extra time for this. I'm going to lead into an area with some of the important insights from people who are not being recognized, but who I believe we should listen to what they have to say. We can accept or reject it, but we shouldn't intentionally self-censor ourselves. I'm going to begin with Israel, because that is something you just opened with, and I think it's important. And I'm going to begin by reading a letter. It's a short letter from Miriam Citrin, and here's what she has to say. Mariana Citrin. Horrors happen in the world, and we struggle to explain them and to fight to stop them. I learned this from my Jewish parents. I seek justice, but horrors happening in the name of those who have been historically oppressed, murdering people who have nothing, absolutely nothing, to do with that historical oppression, but using it as an excuse for murder, this is grotesque. We, the world, will no longer permit this lie. It must stop. This has zero to do with seeking justice for Judaism and all else. The world is imploring you, Israel. The world is demanding of you, Israel, stop. Stop the horror. Stop using our historical oppression to explain the horrors. We as Jews, organizing around the world, no longer permit you to use in our name, our identity as Jews, our historical oppression as a rationale for your warring and torture. We hereby take back the Jewish identity. You cannot speak or act in our name. I am sick every day. I fear the news and the images. I am so pained. I have trouble turning it on. Is that the intention behind the horror? That humanity is immobilized with shock? Celebrating the murders of babies, defending the murder of pregnant women, leaving them with nowhere to run when the bombs fall, shutting off people's water and electricity, hoping what? That they all starve or dehydrate? Who does that? It is so shocking that it makes one pause. Is it the pause that it is desired? That we, all over the world, just look on with our mouths open and chest in constant contraction? If that is the intention, it has been a success. Our collective mouths are agape in horror. Immobility, however, has not occurred. Quite the opposite. Millions of people around the world are in the streets and all over the internet crying, demanding and screaming for Israel to stop. One of the most increasingly vocal groups are Jews, organized as Jews, demanding an end to the massacre, taking back Judaism from Israel. I do not base my political organizing on my identity, not as a woman, a mother, a daughter, or a Jew. Or at least I did not used to do this. Now I must. I'm not alone. Hundreds of groups identified as Jews against the occupation and war have sprung up over the past few weeks all around the world, demanding that Israel not use our identity to wage murder, demanding that Israel stop. Many Jews feel that Israel is taking their Judaism and refuse to allow this. Many others, like myself, feel forced to identify as Jewish, taking back an identity rather than allowing to be used in the name of war, torture, and murder. And then it goes on from there. Then this is a separate piece. It is prominent Jewish leader This is very important. Boy, for those at Fox and on the right who, or the corporate left, either one, who refuse to look at the history of this conflict, the progenitor to it, this is an eye-opener. The article is entitled Prominent Jewish Leader, Israel Intentionally Massacred Civilians in 1948 to Terrorize the Population. From Washington Blog, quote, the targeting of civilians was started by Jewish terrorist groups. Henry Sigman, an executive director of the American Jewish Congress, long described as one of the nation's big three Jewish organizations for 16 years. Sigman, an ordained Orthodox rabbi, was also the head of the Synagogue Council of America and a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Born in Germany 3 years before the Nazis came to power, his family had to move from place to place to avoid Nazi persecution. His father was a leader of the European Zionist movement that pushed for the creation of a Jewish state. Last week, Sigman spoke about Israel war crimes at the very creation of the State of Israel. Quote, I'm quoting now, Israel had in its pre-state stage, several terrorist groups that did exactly what Hamas does today. I don't mean they sent rockets, but they killed innocent people, and they did that in an even more targeted way than these rockets do. Benny Morris published a book that is considered the Bible on that particular period. In the book, Righteous Victims, in which he said, I recall when I read it, I was shocked, in which he, particularly in his most recently updated book, which was based on some new information that the Israeli Defense Group had to open up and publish, that Israeli generals received direct instructions from David Ben-Gurion during the War of Independence to kill civilians or line them up against the wall and shoot them in order to help to encourage the exodus, that in fact resulted of 700,000 Palestinians who were driven out of there or forced to leave their homes, and their towns and their villages were destroyed. This was terror, even within not just the terrorist groups, the pre-state terrorists, but this is within the military, the Israeli military, that fought the War of Independence. And in this recent book that has received so much public attention, quote, Ari Shavit, he describes several such incidents too, and incidentally, one of the people who, according to Benny Morris, one of the people who received these orders, and they were oral orders, but he, in his book, describes why he believes that these orders were given to none other than Rabin, who was not a general then, but he executed these orders. He executed civilians, and the rationale given for this when Shavit, some years ago, had an interview with Benny Morris, and he said to him, quote, my God, you are saying that there was deliberate ethnic cleansing here? And Morris said, yes, there was. And he says, and you justify it? And he said, yes, because otherwise there would be no state of Israel. And Javits did not follow up. And that was one of my turning points when I saw that. He would not follow up and say, well, if that is justification to struggle for statehood, why can't Palestinians do that? In Israel, they made the heads of the two major pre-state terrorist groups prime ministers. So this distinction he's drawing is simply false. It's not true. The heads of the two terrorist groups, which incidentally, again, going back to Benny Morris in his book, Righteous Victims, he writes in this pre-state account that the targeting of civilians was started by the Jewish terrorist groups and the Arab groups followed. And Sigmund says that the slaughter continuing today, quote, when one thinks that this is what is necessary for Israel to survive, that the Zionist dream is based on the repeated slaughter of innocents on a scale that we're watching these days on television, that is really a profound, profound crisis and should be a profound crisis in the thinking of all of us who were committed to the establishment of the state and to its success. It leads one virtually to a whole rethinking of the historical phenomena, end quote. And finally, to this. This is a quote, Gerald, from the newspaper, the leading newspaper, Zionist's Haaretz in 1943, quote, Zionism and Judaism is not one thing but two different things. and of course two contradicting one another. Zionism starts at the place where Judaism is destroyed. One thing is certain, Zionism is not a continuation or healing of wounded Judaism, but rather an uprooting, end quote. And then finally, for those who want to see what the head of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, considered, these are his direct quotes. Quote, "We must use terror, assassination, intimidation, land confiscation, and the cutting off of all social services to rid the Galilee of its Arab population." Quote, "If I could save all the children of Germany by bringing them to England, or only half to Israel, I would choose the second." End quote. So here is my question to you. Are we capable, as a world, as a nation, to understand the nature and history of this conflict and to seek ways of keeping both the Jewish population safe and the ability to live in a non-state of fear, and the Palestinian people free and safe to live without restrictions and where they can determine their own quality of life? Is that possible? And if not, why? And why have we not looked at the true history of this conflict?
Well, in the last question, and then going back to the solution, why have we not looked at it and for what it was? First of all, if you criticize Israel, as I mentioned, you're called an anti-Semite. That in itself is disingenuous, since you also mentioned Zionism, which was the father of Zionism is Theodor Herzl, who is from Budapest, the eastern part of Hungary. When you look at every one of the Israeli prime ministers, Golda Meir, Ben-Gurion, you go up and down the list to Netanyahu, Sharon, everyone, Perez, Begin, everyone are all Ashkenazi. They are not Semites. They are Eastern Europeans. When you look at when all this began, it began in the late 1800s going into the 1900s when there was massive colonialism going on from Europe. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spanish, the French, the English. They were colonizing the entire region, including Africa. This is nothing more than a colonization. It's no different than Spain going to a country, conquering it to bring religion to the pagans and making up any story that they wanted. They've made up this story. The story was, the truth of the story is, yes, they were slaughtered by the Nazis. The fabrication of the story is, what are you doing in, a country so far away from you? Well, God gave us that. Well, God wasn't a real estate agent, and the Bible isn't a land deed. So the reason we can't see the truth behind it is because of the propaganda. Full-page ads run in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, papers throughout the world by Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Peace Laureate. Jews reject child sacrifice 3,500 years ago. Now it's Hamas's turn. More than 1,000 years ago, Abraham had 2 children. One son had been sent into the wilderness and was in danger of dying. God saved him with water from a spring. The other son was bound, his throat about to be cut by his own father. But God stayed the knife. Both sons, Ishmael and Isaac, received promises that they would father great nations. With these narratives, monotheism and Western civilization began, and the Canaanite practices of child sacrifice to Moloch are forever left behind by the descendants of Abraham, except they are not. In my own lifetime, I have seen Jewish children thrown into the fire, and now I have seen Muslim children use